A Werewolf Shifter Romance by Cauliflower Campbell. Chapter 1. The Kingdom Left in Sorrow. The kingdom of Valkorn had always been a land where legends walked in living flesh, where alphas ruled with strength and lunas with wisdom. Mighty forests bowed to their presence, towering citadels thrived under their guidance, and the people slept each night under a veil of safety woven by the ruling pair. Songs were written about them, the Alpha and his Luna, protectors of the northern wolves. But all songs end, and theirs ended at the Salazar seas. The waves that morning were not ordinary waves. They rose like fangs, biting into the sides of the royal vessel, swallowing the ship whole. No survivor, no body, no explanation. The kingdom's heart simply drowned, and Valkorn changed forever. In the aftermath, a strange stillness settled over the northern lands, as though the wind itself was waiting for someone to take up the mantle of power left behind. But there was only one heir, Calista, 5 years old, a beautiful young girl, her long, wavy, fiery red hair shining like a lantern against her soft porcelain skin. Too gentle, too small, too innocent to even understand what death meant, and yet she felt it, the ripping away of her parents' warmth, the cold vacuum it left inside her tiny chest. She could not shift. She could not summon a wolf. She was considered wolfless, and by law, wolfless blood could not rule. So the kingdom whispered, and the council convened, and power shifted hands. From the shadows of the council chamber emerged a man none ever expected to lead. Not yet, not so soon, not at such a young age. Kael Ashclaw, the youngest elder in Valkorn's history. Tall, broad-shouldered, handsome in the dangerous way men should never be. Mischievous brown eyes that rarely revealed what he truly felt. Raven black hair that fell in a straight, disciplined sheet down his back. Tied sometimes, loose at others. His presence could still entire rooms and silence older men with a single glance. And he wielded power. Real power, the kind that bent rules, shaped destinies, and crushed entire bloodlines with a few spoken commands. When he stood before the council, the torches trembled. "We need stability," he said, voice smooth like cold steel. "A kingdom cannot survive under a child. Until the princess comes of age, and only if she proves she has a wolf, I will stand as sovereign governor." No one dared oppose him. Not when his power pressed into the room like an unseen hand gripping every throat. All except one man, Beta George, loyal second-in-command to Callista's father, older, wiser, and the only man in Valkorn who did not bow in fear before Kael Ashclaw. He watched Kael with sharp, unflinching eyes. He guarded Calista like she was the last flame in a world of gathering darkness. Kael knew better than to push him. With the old Beta around, he never stepped too close to the princess, never let his lingering stares last too long, never allowed his intentions to surface. But he always watched her. Every year as Calista grew, the kingdom saw beauty unfolding like a cursed prophecy. Her red hair lengthened, soft waves falling past her shoulders. Her delicate face sharpened into elegance. Her porcelain skin glowed like moonstone no artist could recreate. When she was brought into council meetings simply to represent her bloodline, the room always breathed differently. Elders shifted uncomfortably. Warriors lowered their eyes. Conversations died mid-sentence, because Kael stared, openly, boldly, possessively, and the council pretended not to notice. One evening, after Beta, George tucked the princess into bed, brushing aside her hair, whispering softly for her to sleep peacefully. He stepped out of her chamber and walked down the dim corridor. The night was cold, the moon sharp, the castle too quiet. He moved past an open doorway, one he had walked by countless times before, when a murmur slipped out, a voice he recognized instantly. Kael's. "Allow me to deceive the princess. Make her believe she is chosen. She will not resist once she trusts me." Beta George froze. His heartbeat hammered in his ears as he pressed himself quietly against the wall, listening deeper, Kael's voice deepened, lowering into something far more sinister. She is the key to an heir. Valkorn needs a ruler born of power, not a fragile child with a questionable wolf. I will guide her, she will obey. Silence. Then another voice, a council member. And if she refuses? She is young, naive, but stubborn. Kael's laugh chilled the hallway. She won't refuse. I will make sure of that. Something snapped inside Beta George. He barged into the room, fury burning like wildfire in his veins, prepared to tear Kael apart with his bare hands. But Kael was not alone. Half the council, men Calista's father trusted, men sworn to her bloodline, stood beside him. And in that moment, Beta George knew. This wasn't a foolish, lust-driven desire. This was a conspiracy, a full betrayal. They didn't argue. They didn't attempt to reason. They didn't even hesitate. They attacked. The old Beta fought like a cornered beast, roaring, clawing, throwing them aside despite his age. He nearly escaped, nearly reached the hallway, nearly reached Callista's door. But someone grabbed him, another struck, another held him down. And Kael approached slowly, calmly, like death wearing a handsome face. You've protected her long enough, old man. Beta George spit blood at his feet. You will never touch her. Never. Kael smiled. We'll let the kingdom decide. And with a swift, cruel motion, they threw him from the tower window. His scream was swallowed by the night. His body struck the courtyard stones with a sickening finality, and the kingdom lost its last true protector. The next morning, the sun rose bright and unfeeling, mocking her grief. Calista ran toward the courtyard when they told her. She collapsed beside Beta George's lifeless body, her tiny hands trembling as she touched his cold, stiff fingers. She cried until her breath broke, cried until her voice shredded, cried until her small frame shook so violently the healers feared she would fall sick. She had lost her parents. Now she lost him too, the last person who truly loved her. And from that day the kingdom knew the princess was alone, left for the monsters. But a new story was beginning, a dangerous one, a forbidden one. Chapter 2. The Council's Grip. The kingdom of Valkorn, once vibrant with festivals, wolf runs, and the proud thunder of its royal guard, had grown quieter with every passing year of Callista's life. As she neared adulthood, the air itself felt tense, like the kingdom held its breath and waited for something it had stopped believing would ever come. The people whispered more freely now, though never within sight of the guards. She hasn't shifted. An alpha without a wolf. Can she even rule? What if this is our punishment for losing the king and queen? Kael should stay in power. He's the only one keeping this place from falling apart. Rumors spread like wildfire through markets, inns, and training grounds. Calista heard them even from her tower. Windows could not block the sting of a kingdom questioning her existence. Inside the council hall, Kael fed those whispers. He didn't need to shout. His voice carried the weight of a man who knew he already owned the room. The princess has shown no sign of shifting, he announced in one meeting, arms folded behind his back as he paced before the long marble table. If she reaches full maturity without a wolf, how do we justify placing her on the throne? A murmur, a few nods, a few fearful glances. Councilman Roderick cleared his throat. The people are worried. Valkorn has never had a wolfless alpha. Kael turned sharply, his mischievous brown eyes darkening. And the people are right to worry. A werewolf shifter kingdom without a wolf-led ruler is unstable, vulnerable. Another elder added, Perhaps the princess should not be burdened with rulership until she proves. Kael cut him off, voice smooth as velvet but sharp as a blade. Until she proves she is capable of leading, and to be capable, she must have a wolf. He paused, letting the truth settle like a trap. Until then, my leadership remains necessary. No one dared challenge him, not anymore. He had grown too powerful, too unpredictable. too willing to silence dissent in permanent ways. Up in her tower, Calista stared through the tall glass panes at the castle grounds below. The gardens glowed with morning mist, and far beyond, she could see the training yard where young warriors sparred under the sun. They all had wolves, they all had freedom, and she had neither. Her reflection in the window showed a young woman blooming into beauty, long, wavy, fiery hair cascading like flame over her shoulders, porcelain skin soft and delicate, eyes that held more sadness than light. She knew she was beautiful. Valkorn constantly whispered it, but beauty had never protected her. A soft knock sounded. Princess? It was Kira, her closest handmaiden, and in truth, the closest thing she had ever had to a friend. Calista turned slowly. Yes? Elder Kael is... Kira paused, swallowing hard. On his way. The words made Callista's knees weaken. Her hands began trembling, but she hid them behind her back. Already? He came 3 days ago. I know, Kira whispered. I'm sorry. There was no escape, no excuse, no guard who would intervene. The tower was her gilded prison, and Kael held the only key. Heavy footsteps echoed up the stairs. Callista's breath hitched as she backed away from the door. Kira gently squeezed her shoulder. I'll stay outside. I promise I'll stay, Calista nodded, barely. The door pushed open without a knock. Kael entered tall, broad-shouldered, confident, his raven hair tied loosely behind him, strands falling over his sharp cheekbones. His eyes roamed over her in a way that made her stomach twist. Calista, he said softly, too softly, closing the door behind him. You look radiant today. She said nothing. Her silence was the only act of rebellion left to her. Kael smirked. Still shy with me, princess, after all these years? He approached, his boots echoing against the marble floor. Calista took one step back, then another, until her back met the cold wall. He reached out, brushing a strand of her red hair aside. You know why I'm here. Please, she whispered. I don't feel well. You never feel well, Kael replied with quiet amusement, but we must try again. Valkorn needs an heir. Her breath came out shaky. I am not ready, we're not even wedded. I don't care, and no one cares to stop me. You are mine. His voice dropped, sharp as ice. And you will comply. He gripped her dress, tearing the fabric with a single motion. She flinched hard, biting back her cry, but it escaped anyway, a soft, broken sound that filled the room like a wound. He pushed her onto the bed, ignoring her sobs, ignoring her hands that tried to push him away. Stop. Kael, please. It hurts. But pain never stopped him. He took her as he always did, hard, forceful, without tenderness, without humanity, until she trembled so violently she couldn't speak. When he was done, he stood and adjusted his clothing, unmoved by her tears. Rest, he said. The healers will come tomorrow. He left without looking at her again. Outside the door, Kira wiped her eyes before rushing into the room to cover Calista with blankets, whispering comfort she knew meant nothing. Calista spent hours shaking uncontrollably, hours staring at nothing, hours wondering if she would ever be free. When dawn came, she went to the bathhouse. Kira followed with bowls of herbs. Calista stepped into the warm water, hugging her knees as she tried to wash away Kael's touch. She scrubbed and scrubbed until her skin burned red. Kira caught her wrists. Princess, stop! You'll hurt yourself. I already hurt, Calista whispered. It doesn't go away. Kira held her as she cried silently into her shoulder. Every month, Kael sent physicians, never women, always men, to test whether Calista carried his child. The tests were crude, invasive, humiliating. One morning, as two older healers knelt before her in her chamber, preparing their instruments, Calista clenched the sheets beneath her. Please? Her voice trembled. Not again. We must follow Elder Kael's orders, one whispered. He didn't meet her eyes. He didn't want to see her pain. As they began, Calista cried out sharply, gripping the bedpost with white knuckles. Kira held her hand tightly, tears running down her face. "I'm sorry," one healer muttered. "I am truly sorry." When they were done, Calista curled into herself, shaking. The older healer looked at the other nervously. "She is not pregnant." "She has never been pregnant," the second whispered. 6 years and nothing. "Shall we tell him to check himself?" The first asked under his breath. "Are you mad?" the other hissed. "Do you want to die?" they informed Kael as gently as possible. He stormed into Callista's chamber that evening. "You're still empty?" he spat. Calista backed away. "It is not my fault." Kael struck her across the face so hard she fell to her knees. "You will not speak to me that way. You will give me an heir, Calista, even if it takes 1,000 nights." And with that, he forced himself on her again. Harder, more enraged, as if he could force life into her by breaking her. Calista grew quieter as years wore on. Her smiles vanished first, then her laughter. Eventually, even her voice weakened, softening like a candle burning out. Every corner of the palace reminded her of limits she could not cross. Every rule Kael created tightened the cage around her. She understood now, fully, painfully, that she was nothing more than a symbol, a puppet, a piece of royal blood kept alive only for Kael's convenience. If she acted out, she would be crushed. If she defied him, she would be destroyed. If she tried to run, he would hunt her to the ends of Sintra. But she still had Kira. And sometimes, on quiet nights, they dared to dream. In rare moments when Kael was away for council meetings, Kira and Calista would sneak out from the tower into the palace gardens. It was the only place Calista felt alive. She breathed the scent of roses, lavender, and the sweet earth after rain. She touched petals with trembling fingers. She sat beside the reflecting pond, dipping her hand in cool water. Here she wasn't a puppet. She wasn't a prisoner. She wasn't Wolfless royalty. Here she was just Calista. She sat under a willow tree one evening, whispering to Kira, "Sometimes I wonder if my mother used to come here. If she sat here like this." Kira smiled sadly. "She loved the gardens, princess. The queen was gentle. Everyone says you look like her." Callista's heart tightened painfully. "I wish I remembered more." Kira squeezed her hand. "One day you will be free from him, I swear it." Calista shook her head. "Kael will never let me go. If I ran, he'd hunt me. If I fought back, he'd kill me." "But you have a heart stronger than his entire council," Kira whispered. "That is something he will never understand." Calista looked toward the east tower rising over the palace. Her cage. For a moment, the wind blew through her hair and she closed her eyes, pretending it was freedom. As Calista grew older, Kael grew more impatient, more violent. His touch became rougher, his visits more frequent, his punishments harsher. One night, after she flinched away from him, he grabbed her face so hard her jaw ached for days. "Do not dare reject me," Kael hissed against her cheek. "I own you." Callista's breath shook. "I don't want this." "You don't get to want anything," he replied. He made her tremble again that night. Not from desire, not from affection, but from pain so deep she couldn't walk properly the next morning. The people of Valkorn could sense something was wrong. They saw the princess less and less. They noticed Kael's growing arrogance. They whispered but never acted. Because Kael ruled with fear, and fear silenced even the bravest. For 6 long years, Kael tried to produce an heir. For 6 long years, Calista prayed for escape. For 6 long years, the kingdom held its breath. And for 6 long years, Calista never became pregnant. Not once. Kael never realized the truth. But Calista felt it deep in her bones. Her body was protecting her. From the one thing that would chain her to him forever. A child. As long as she carried none, she still had a fragment of hope. A fragile, flickering spark of possibility. That one day she might escape this prison of stone and pain. She did not know how, she did not know when. But she knew this. Kael would not own her forever. Not her heart, not her future, not her soul. Something inside her was still alive. Barely, quietly, but alive. and that tiny ember was waiting for the day when it would ignite into something Kael could never control. Chapter 3. The Stolen Crown of Valkorn. The morning of her parents' death anniversary began like every other day of Calista's life. Quiet, cold, and painfully predictable. Dawn spilled pale gold across the tower walls, brightening the stone but never warming it. Calista lay still beneath the thin blankets, staring at the high ceiling, listening to the same sounds she heard every morning. The faint clatter of servants in distant halls, the rustle of banners caught by early winds, the lonely echo of footsteps from knights patrolling the courtyard below. Her life was a circle. Wake up, eat, bathe, sit by the window, repeat. 17 years of the same rhythm, as though time itself had been trapped in this tower alongside her. Today should have been different. Today carried weight, memory, grief, and the legacy of the king and queen Valkorn lost. But for Calista, even this sacred day blended into the monotony that had become her world. She sat on the cushioned window ledge, knees tucked to her chest, looking down at the bustling kingdom. Banners of deep violet, the royal mourning color, hung from every balcony. People in the streets tied scraps of purple fabric around their arms. Lanterns glowed even in daylight as preparations for the evening's festivities began. Lavish festivities, orchestrated by the very man who stole her life, Kael. Even when honoring her dead parents, he found a way to turn grief into power. A knock sounded on her chamber door. Princess Calista. A servant's timid voice floated through the wood. Elder Kael requests your presence in the grand hall. Not an invitation, a command. Calista rose, smoothing the wrinkles in her elegant velvet-colored dress, and followed the guard assigned to escort her. She always had guards escorting her, not to protect her, but to contain her. The moment she entered the lower levels of the tower, she could hear music. Strings tuning, flutes humming, drums tapping. The palace had come alive for the anniversary. But beneath all that beauty, Calista could feel tension. A subtle electric charge clinging to the air. Kael was preparing for his grand performance. The grand hall burst with color and movement. Servants decorated the marble pillars with violet flowers. Long tables overflowed with platters of roasted meats, sugared fruits, glazed pastries. Musicians tuned while dancers practiced soft spins. Even the chandeliers had been polished so brightly they shimmered like stars. Kael stood in the center of the hall, giving orders like a king though he wasn't one. His cloak swept the floor, black and heavy, trimmed with silver threads. His hair was perfectly combed back, his boots shining. He wore dignity like a weapon, charm like armor. The moment he saw Calista, a calculating smile crept across his lips. There she is, he announced, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. Our radiant princess. Calista felt the weight of every eye. She swallowed the bitterness rising in her throat and walked toward him, head bowed. He cupped her jaw, too firmly, thumb brushing her cheek in a gesture meant to look affectionate. Smile, he whispered under his breath, lips barely moving. You'll do as you're told tonight. She forced a small curve of her lips. Kael leaned close. Good girl. The words twisted her stomach. The council members approached, bowing stiffly. Elder Rowan cleared his throat. The kingdom is eager to see the princess honor her parents today. And she will, Kael replied before Calista could speak. After all, what else does she have to do? The council exchanged glances, uneasy, careful. No one challenged him. Calista stood beside Kael as dignitaries from neighboring kingdoms arrived wearing elaborate masks to hide their identities. Kael loved theatrics, and this masquerade gave him the illusion of being desired by powerful strangers. He greeted each guest warmly, bragging about Valkorn's stability, its traditions, its relics, the most important being the crown of Valkorn, displayed on a pedestal in a glass case at the far end of the hall. The crown, forged centuries ago, was the symbol of true leadership, No one but the rightful ruler could wear it at the annual ascension ceremony, a tradition Kael avoided by never attempting it. Rumors whispered that anyone unworthy would feel burning pain the moment the crown touched their head. Calista welcomed guests quietly, as instructed, bowing, speaking politely and smiling on cue. Kael watched her constantly, like a hawk watching prey. Hours passed, and finally Kael leaned close and whispered, "You've been seen. That's enough. Go back to your tower." A small table of assorted delicacies was prepared for her in advance, an elaborate show for guests to believe she lived comfortably. She hated it. Calista nodded, said nothing, and returned to her lonely prison. The guards locked her door. She stared at the table full of pastries, fruits, breads. Then, with a soft, breathy curse, she pushed the entire table over. Plates shattered, sauces splattered across the floor, silverware clattered and spun. Her anger pulsed hot beneath her skin, anger she could never show in front of Kael. As the noise settled, she sank onto the floor beside the mess, her breath trembling. Kira would have laughed at that, she whispered to herself. The kingdom glowed beneath lantern light as people celebrated, mourned, danced, drank, laughed, cried. Music drifted through the air, echoing all the way up the tower. Calista leaned on her windowsill. At first, everything looked normal. Then, a sudden scream cut through the music. A horn blared. Then another. Then another. Guards burst from the palace gates with torches, sprinting across the courtyards, shouting orders. Chaos swallowed the night. Callista's brows furrowed. What is happening? More guards emerged. Dozens, possibly hundreds. Torches flickered across the kingdom, scattering like fireflies. Horses thundered toward the main roads. Scouts climbed the sentry towers. The entire kingdom was suddenly alive with panic. Calista felt her pulse quicken. She pressed her forehead against the glass. Then she heard it. A distant shout carried by the wind. "The crown! The crown of Valkorn missing!" Her chest tightened. The crown? Stolen? During the anniversary? She could only imagine the fury twisting Kael's face. Down below, the palace courtyard erupted as soldiers armed themselves. Commanders bellowed instructions. Lock every gate. No one leaves the kingdom. Search every house. Check every stable. Notify the council. Hooves slammed the ground as search parties galloped into the night, their torches slicing through the darkness. Calista felt something she had not felt in years. A small, guilty smile. Not because she supported the theft, no, but because someone, somewhere, had managed to rattle Kael, to shake his perfect facade, to slip past his arrogance, to make him lose something precious. Calista whispered into the night, "I wish I could see his face right now." She imagined him storming through the halls, coat billowing behind him, barking orders at guards who scrambled out of his way. She imagined the tremor of fury in his voice, the sharp tension in his jaw, the wild look in his eyes. For the first time in years, something had disrupted the suffocating silence of her life. Something unexpected, something uncontrolled, something Kael couldn't prevent. Calista rested her chin on the windowsill and watched the torches swirl through the kingdom like a frantic constellation. Down below, the world was changing, and though she did not know it yet, this night, this stolen crown, this moment, was the beginning of everything that would set her free. Chapter 4. The Man in the Hood. The chaos below her tower raged like a storm, but Calista barely heard it over the pounding of her own heartbeat. She remained perched at her windowsill, back pressed against the cold stone, eyes glowing with forbidden satisfaction. Kael was finally losing control. She could almost taste the tension in the air. From her height she saw the palace, grounds erupt with torches and frantic movement. Search parties split in different directions, commanders shouting orders, scouts racing up the walls, horses neighing as their riders pulled their reins sharply. The entire kingdom had been shaken awake, and Calista sat there with a soft, wicked smile. She imagined Kael's face, twisted with fury, nostrils flaring, vein pulsing at the side of his forehead, cape sweeping behind him in aggravated strides. She imagined him barking orders. "Find the thief. Seal every exit. Bring me back the crown of Valkorn." It amused her. More than it should have. She had never succeeded in bothering Kael, never disrupted his picture-perfect control, never caused even the smallest crack in his authority. But someone out there had done it. Someone fearless, someone clever, someone bold, someone who stole the crown right under his nose. She rested her cheek against the window frame, her breath fogging the glass. "I hope he's throwing chairs," she muttered to herself, "or ripping tapestries, or anything." But then a glint caught her eye, a sharp reflection of moonlight cutting across the courtyard like a flick of silver lightning. Callista's brows furrowed. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing. What was that? The light flashed again, quick, small, but unmistakably real. It was moving, dancing between shadows. Not the steady glow of torches, not a weapon lifted by guards. Something, someone, was carrying it. She pressed her palms to the glass and squinted. The distance made everything blurry, but she could make out movement, fast movement. Then she heard the noise, boots pounding, voices shouting, metal clanging, arrows slicing through the air, a chase. Her heart thudded. Guards stormed through the lower gardens, their formation chaotic and desperate. She could hear the captain yelling, "Cut him off! He has the crown! Don't let him reach the east towers! Archers, aim for the legs, not the chest. Kael wants him alive." Callista's breath caught. A thief? That fast? That bold? That close? Her eyes followed the cluster of torches until she spotted a figure running ahead of them, cloaked in black, hood drawn low, leaping over fountains and weaving through hedges with impossible precision. He was heading straight toward her tower. Her pulse skyrocketed. The man was fast, too fast for the guards. He dove under a swinging blade, rolled across the grass and sprinted again. Each movement was practiced, sharp, effortless. Callista's breath grew shallow. Her tower was isolated, empty, guarded only at the base. Why would he run here? As the figure approached, the moonlight struck the object hanging from the strap of his leather satchel. That same silver flash hit her eyes. The shine was unmistakably metallic. The crown of Valkorn was inside his bag. Callista's lips parted in shock. The sacred relic Kael worshipped more than anything was bouncing against the thigh of a thief. She almost laughed, but the sound died in her throat when she saw what happened next. An arrow hissed through the air, flying so close to the thief's shoulder that it sliced a piece of his cloak. He stumbled, regained balance, and looked up, right at her tower. Calista leaned forward instinctively. Something about the way he moved, the shape of his body under the cloak, the strength in his steps. She felt a strange pull. He slowed, just for a moment. The angle of his head shifted, his hood tilted upward. And then, their eyes met. Calista froze. The world around her vanished. The noise, the chaos, the torches, the shouts. Time tightened into a single silent thread stretching between the two of them. His face was still mostly hidden, shadows clinging to his jaw and cheekbones. But his eyes, gods, his eyes, piercing ocean blue. So intense they seemed to cut through the night, so bright they seemed to glow. So familiar they felt like something she once knew, long ago, in a life she barely remembered. Her breath stilled. He held her gaze unmoving, unblinking, as though he too felt something strange, something electric, something impossible to name. Her fingers curled against the stone. Her belly flipped, her chest tightened painfully. Why did his eyes feel like home? Why did they feel like a memory? Why did looking at him hurt? Her throat worked silently as she tried to speak, but nothing came out. Far below, someone screamed, "There! By the EAST tower! Shoot!" The thief's eyes flickered with alertness, not fear. He jerked his head away from her just as 3 archers released their arrows at once, but he moved like water, like instinct, like someone who had been fighting his whole life. He pivoted sharply, leaping aside as the arrows slammed into the wall behind him. One arrow grazed his ribs, tearing his cloak, but he did not stumble this time. He sprinted toward the shadowed trees by the tower's base. Calista slammed both hands against the glass. Wait! Why did she call out to him? Why did she feel anything at all? She pressed her forehead against the window, chest rising and falling rapidly. Through the dark garden she saw the hooded man disappear into a cluster of vines and stone arches. Only the faint glimmer of moonlight bouncing off the crown bag told her he was still running. Guards chased him like hounds chasing a phantom, shouting, cursing, tripping over roots he dodged effortlessly. He vanished behind the palace gardens. Gone. Calista remained glued to the window, eyes burning, heart racing, unsure if she was breathing or suffocating. Her fingertips touched the cold glass as if reaching for him. Who? Are you? She didn't know him. She had never seen him. Not once in 17 years had she met someone outside the palace except council members and Kael's chosen guests. Yet the moment she saw his eyes, something deep inside her shifted, cracked, woke up. He was a thief, a stranger, a criminal running for his life. But somehow, she felt like he had stolen something from her as well. Not the crown, not a possession, but something far more dangerous. A piece of her heart she didn't know she still had. She sank slowly to her knees, staring blankly into the night, long after the last torch disappeared. And even when the world grew quiet again, even when the search parties returned empty-handed, even when Kael's furious roar echoed faintly across the kingdom, Calista could not forget the man in the hood. His eyes burned behind her eyelids, his gaze replayed in her mind. His presence haunted her pulse. As she curled into herself on the cold stone floor, she whispered into the darkness, "I've seen those eyes before, even if I don't remember when." The chaos continued outside, but inside the tower, Callista's world had just cracked open, and nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 5. The Milk Bath. Calista sat on the cold stone floor of her tower chamber long after the hooded stranger vanished from sight. Her breath was still unsteady, her fingers still tingled, her heart still refused to settle into its usual numb rhythm. She pressed the back of her hand to her forehead, trying to will the memory away, but the image burned brighter with every attempt to forget. Those eyes, those impossibly blue, striking ocean-depth eyes, burning through the shadows, burning into her, burning inside her. Something moved in her chest, something she hadn't felt since childhood, before her life became a cage. A flutter, a spark, a stirring she didn't know how to process. "Who are you?" she whispered again, voice trembling with confusion, with fear, and with longing. Before she could sink too deep into her swirling thoughts, the tower door burst open. "Calista!" Kira's voice cut through the air, breathless and frantic. Calista didn't move at first. Her gaze remained locked on the window as if expecting the stranger to reappear in the darkness. Kira rushed to her side. "Did you hear? Did you hear what happened?" Calista blinked once, slowly, then turned her head with a dazed expression. "About the crown?" Kira dropped onto her knees, nodding vigorously. "Yes, the crown was stolen. The entire kingdom is in chaos. Elder Kael is furious, absolutely furious. I think he nearly strangled a guard." Calista let a small, quiet smile curl on her lips. "Good." Kira's mouth fell open. "Calista, you can't say things like that." "I can't help it," Calista murmured, pulling her knees to her chest. "It's the first time something has gone wrong for him. Something he didn't plan. Something he didn't control." She gazed out the window again. "I wish I could have seen his face." Kira covered her mouth, half horrified, half amused. "You're terrible for thinking that." "I know," Calista whispered, "but I don't care." Kira softened. She lowered her voice. "Are you all right? You seem distracted." Calista swallowed. "I just saw something." "What?" "Nothing," Calista said quickly, shaking her head. "It's nothing." She wasn't ready to speak about him. Not yet. The memory was still too raw, too strange, too new. Saying it out loud would make it real. Kira stood and dusted her skirts. Come on, it's late. You need your bath. It'll help you sleep. And maybe settle your mind a little. Calista didn't argue. She felt too lightheaded, too tangled inside. Kira helped her stand, then crossed the room to where a folded gown lay on the bed. Put this on, she said gently. The bathhouse is warm tonight. I heated it myself. Calista allowed herself to be guided. She lifted her arms as Kira undressed her from the heavy velvet gown she had worn to the royal gathering earlier, the one Kael had chosen, golden, stiff, suffocating. Kira hummed a soft tune as she slipped Calista into a white, loose, flowing dress made of soft cotton. Gentle, comfortable, free. But Callista's mind wasn't on the dress, or the bath, or anything in the room. She kept replaying the moment. The man's face half-shadowed beneath his hood, the way he slowed when he saw her, the way their eyes locked, and the way her heart nearly burst. Calista? Kira waved a hand in front of her eyes. You're completely someplace else tonight. I'm fine, Calista whispered, but her voice was faint. Kira didn't believe her, but she didn't push. Instead, she took Callista's hand and guided her out of the room. The tower hallways were dimly lit with lanterns that flickered against the stones. They walked in silence, their footsteps echoing. Outside, distant shouts still filled the air. Guards calling, horses galloping, metal clanging as search teams switched rotations. The stolen crown had shaken the entire kingdom. The bathhouse was at the far end of the east tower, attached to a long balcony open to the moon. When Kira pushed open the carved wooden doors, warm, fragrant steam swirled around them. Calista inhaled deeply. The scent was beautiful: milk, roses, vanilla, lavender. Sweet and soft, the kind of scent that hinted at peace, even if peace never stayed long. Moonlight flowed through the wide window arches, bathing the marble floor in pale silver. The pool itself glowed faintly, filled with warm milk that rippled gently under the flickering candles placed along the edges. Kira immediately went to work. She carried pots of warm milk, pouring them slowly into the pool as soft swirls of steam rose. Then she scattered fresh rose petals across the white surface. Light pink, deep red, lavender, and pure white petals floated in delicate patterns, forming swirls around Callista's reflection. She uncorked bottles of oil, letting lavender drizzle into the water like liquid tranquility. Then vanilla, then a hint of chamomile. The scent grew deeper, richer, comforting. Callista's shoulders relaxed for the first time since the evening began. It's beautiful, she whispered, stepping forward. Kira smiled. Just for you. Now get in before the water cools. Calista hesitated only a moment before allowing Kira to help her step in. The milk water was warm and soft, enveloping her body like silk. She eased herself down until the water hugged her shoulders. Her long red hair fanned out around her, floating on the surface like flames drifting underwater. Kira's eyes softened. You look like a blooming flower, my lady. Calista played with a rose petal drifting near her hand, gently pushing it back and forth. It feels nice. I'll add more petals, Kira said cheerfully. The handmaidens are fetching another batch. I'll be right back. She stood and headed toward the exit just as two young handmaidens entered with baskets of petals and more pots of warm milk. I'll help them, Kira said over her shoulder. Call me if you need anything. Calista nodded, eyes half closed. The girls stepped out. The soft door thudded shut. Silence returned, warm, peaceful, still. Calista leaned back, letting her head rest against the marble rim. She closed her eyes, letting the warm milk bathe her skin. The moonlight kissed her face. Her heartbeat finally began to slow. She inhaled deeply, letting the floral scent draw her into calm, until a sound sliced through the quiet, a rush of air, a soft thud, a faint clatter. Callista's eyes snapped open. She sat upright, heart thudding violently. Her wet hair clung to her shoulders, droplets sliding down her neck. "Hello?" she whispered into the stillness. No answer. She pushed herself toward the middle of the bath, eyes scanning the shadows. Something moved, a shape, tall, broad, muscular, stepping out slowly from behind a column in the far corner. Calista screamed. The figure froze, then stepped into the moonlight. It was him, the hooded man, the thief, the stranger with the ocean blue eyes. Her scream caught mid-breath as her hand flew to her mouth. He moved quickly, crossing the distance with silent, fluid steps. Before she could scream again, he knelt beside the milk bath, pressed a finger to her lips, and whispered, "Don't," his voice, low, deep, steady. It rolled through her like a shock wave. Her eyes widened, but she didn't move. She couldn't. Every muscle turned to stone as his face came into clearer view. His hood was down now, revealing a strong jaw dusted with stubble, high cheekbones, a straight nose, and lips shaped with a quiet intensity. But his eyes, those impossible eyes, dominated everything. Up close, they were even more breathtaking. Deep blue, cold but vibrant, fierce but strangely gentle. She stared at him, trembling. He watched her for a long, waited moment before murmuring, "I'm not here to hurt you." Callista's voice trembled. "What are you doing here?" His eyes softened only a fraction. "Hiding." Before she could speak again, the door opened. Kira entered with a platter of rose petals and hot towels. "My lady, I brought—" Callista's heart slammed into her ribs. She shot her hand up, waving frantically. Kira froze. Calista widened her eyes and whispered urgently, "Out. Now." Kira blinked, confused. Then her face drained of color. She nodded once and slowly stepped backward, closing the door with trembling hands. Calista exhaled shakily. The stranger remained kneeling beside the bath, lowering his hand from her lips. Silence wrapped around them again. Callista's gaze flicked downward, just as he reached for the clasp of his cloak. Her breath caught. He pulled it off, then his shirt, then his boots, piece by piece. Callista's eyes widened in panic. What are you doing?" He didn't smirk, didn't tease, didn't threaten. He simply said, "I need to hide the scent. They're tracking me." His hands moved to his belt. Calista gasped, turning her head away, face blazing red. She had never seen a man undress, not willingly, not peacefully. The only man she had ever been around intimately was Kael, and those memories stabbed like knives. So this moment, this quiet removal of clothes, this man's calm, controlled movements, it stunned her to her core. Fabric dropped to the marble floor. Her breath stopped. Then a soft rustle. He picked up his satchel, the one containing the stolen crown. He pulled out the plant pot sitting near the bathhouse wall, dug a space into the soil with his bare hands, hid the satchel inside, covered it, patted it firmly, then put the plant neatly back in place. Calista stared, stunned. He straightened, now completely unclothed. Moonlight carved over the contours of his body. Broad shoulders, solid chest, defined muscles that moved like tightly coiled power beneath his skin. Calista swallowed hard, unable to look away. He stepped toward the milk bath. Her breath quickened. Her fingers curled around the marble edge. The distance between them grew smaller, and smaller, and smaller. The warm, scented steam rose around them as he approached the water, the tension tightening between their bodies like a drawn bowstring. Callista's heart raced so violently she felt dizzy. The man with the blue eyes stood at the water's edge, looking at her, coming closer. The air cracked with silent electricity, and her world shifted again. Chapter 6. The Guard Interruption. The moment was already too intense for Callista's senses. The warm milk water clung to her skin like silk, the airy scent of lavender, vanilla, and fresh rose petals hovering around her like a soft veil. Her pulse still trembled from the shock of seeing him. That same hooded man with the unforgettable ocean blue eyes, rising from the shadows of her bathhouse like a phantom formed from moonlight and danger. He stood before her now, half submerged, his large muscular frame dripping with milk, breaths deep from the run, eyes locked entirely on her. There was something uncontrollable in the air between them, a thick magnetic pull that made her heartbeat feel too loud in her own ears. And then, voices exploded from outside the bathhouse door. "Let us in," a guard protested. "The heir is inside," one of the handmaidens cried, panicked. "Move aside," a guard barked. We heard shouting. "We must ensure her safety." Kira's voice rose sharply, frustrated and breathless. "She's bathing! You cannot enter!" Callista's heart leapt into her throat. The man's eyes widened as he glanced toward the doorway. If the guards entered, a stranger naked hiding in the milk bath, the chaos would be unimaginable. He'd be killed instantly. And she didn't even know what Kael would do to her. Their eyes met for one electric second, a silent exchange of fear, urgency, trust. Without a word, he lifted a finger to his lips. "Stay quiet, please." She inhaled sharply as he took one final breath and then, silently, powerfully, sank into the warm milk, disappearing beneath the surface like a shadow slipping into darkness. Not even a ripple betrayed where his massive body hid. A heartbeat later, the door flew open. 3 guards stood in the doorway, helmets shining with torchlight. Kira and the other handmaidens hovered behind them, hands clutched to their chests in panic. Calista turned her head slowly, deliberately, her wet red hair clinging to her skin. Her eyes, normally soft and curious, sharpened into something cold and commanding. A warning. "Are you out of your minds?" she snapped, rising from the milk with regal fury. Milk slid down her body like glowing ribbons in the moonlight. Every guard immediately dropped his gaze to the floor, faces burning, armor clattering from their startled movements. We heard yelling. You heard me relaxing," she said sharply. "You barged into a private bath. Turn around." "Now," Kira bowed deeply. "Forgive us, my lady." "Out," Calista commanded, voice steady and unwavering. The guards nearly tripped over each other in their rush to retreat. The door slammed shut behind them. Calista waited, listening intently. Boots, armor, whispers, another set of boots. Fading. Silence. Only when the last echo faded into the night did she turn back toward the milk bath. The surface of the liquid remained perfectly still for a moment. Then, slowly, powerfully, a figure rose. His shoulders emerged first, broad and carved like a warrior's, milk cascading off every contour. Then his chest, defined and strong, glistening in the moonlight. His long, dark hair was slicked back, heavy with milk. And lastly, those eyes, those piercing, ocean-deep, impossible blue eyes, found hers again. He stood so close the tips of their noses could have brushed if she leaned forward even a little. His large frame towered over her, milk dripping from him in slow, mesmerizing trails. The moonlight pouring through the tall tower windows carved shadows along every angle of his body, making him appear even more sculpted, more dangerous, more devastatingly beautiful. Her breath caught in her throat. He wasn't just handsome, he was unreal. She felt heat bloom under her skin, something she never felt around Kael, not even once. Kael only took, demanded, controlled. But this man looked at her like he was holding himself back from reaching out and devouring her with his hands, his mouth, his entire body. Her pulse stumbled, then soared. The pull between them was undeniable, frightening, intoxicating. She had never touched anyone willingly before. And yet, her hand lifted on its own. It hovered for a second, trembling slightly. Then she placed it gently on his chest. His skin was warm beneath her palm, firm, solid, alive. His heartbeat thudded beneath her touch, strong enough to vibrate through her fingers. For a moment, they both froze. Her eyes widened. His jaw flexed, like he was restraining himself with every ounce of discipline he had. And then, without warning, she shoved him, hard. His eyes widened in surprise as his large frame splashed backward into the milk with a low, heavy thud that sent a wave of milk rippling across the bathhouse. He sank willingly, a smirk pulling at his lips even as he disappeared under the surface again. Calista gasped at her own boldness, covering her mouth for a second. What was happening to her? Who was she becoming? Before she could even process it, she stumbled backward, reached for a towel, wrapped it quickly around herself, and stepped away from the bath. Her heart hammered so loud she could swear the whole palace could hear it. At the doorway, she hesitated, one hand gripping the towel, the other on the stone frame. She didn't want to turn around, but she did. He rose again slowly, deliberately, milk trailing down his shoulders, chest, abdomen, as if he were rising from a dream she wasn't prepared to face. "Leave," she whispered, unsure if she even meant it. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. Then, with quiet confidence and a low, controlled voice that curled around her like smoke, he said, "Damien Blackthorn, Princess?" Her breath hitched. The name passed through her mind like a forgotten whisper. "Of course you are," she muttered under her breath, half scuffing, half panicking, half something else entirely. Without waiting for his reaction, because she didn't trust herself to stay, she turned and left the bathhouse. As soon as she stepped into the corridor, her knees felt weak, her heart raced, her skin burned, and for the first time in her entire life, she didn't feel alone in her own body. Behind her, in the silence of the milk-scented bathhouse, Damien Blackthorn watched her go, water dripping from his jawline, eyes burning with something dangerous, and he smiled. Chapter 7. Kael's Questions. The sun rose over Valkorn like a wounded beast, dragging slow shafts of pale light across the kingdom, illuminating the restless chaos left behind from the night before. Guards marched in formation, shouting commands. Horses neighed in agitation, and the ringing clangs of metal echoed from every corner of the capital as the search for the stolen crown continued relentlessly. But inside the East Tower, inside her circular room high above the turmoil, Calista woke up with a softness in her chest she hadn't felt in 17 years. She didn't wake up choking on dread. She didn't wake up wishing the world would swallow her whole. She didn't wake up reliving nightmares or Kael's cold, violent touch. Instead, she woke up smiling. Her hand touched her cheek as if she didn't believe it belonged to her. She felt different. Warmth pulsed beneath her skin in a way that had nothing to do with sunlight. She stretched slowly, her body sinking into the fresh sheets Kira must have changed before dawn. Her long red hair fanned across the pillow, still smelling faintly of lavender and milk from the bath the night before. The memories hit her in fragments, glimpses, flashes, sensations. A man in the shadows, strong hands lifting from milk, blue eyes that seemed carved by fate itself. His voice, his name, Damien Blackthorn. Every time she whispered it in her head, a strange warmth bloomed low in her stomach, spreading upward and outward until she felt almost breathless. She placed a hand on her heart as though it needed to be calmed. Her entire life had been a cycle of forced routines: eat, bathe, trapped in the tower, endure Kael's intentions. Survive one more day. Nothing ever changed, not even the numbness. Yet today, for the first time, something inside her had shifted. Someone had looked at her, truly looked at her, and she had felt alive. "Good morning, my lady," Kira said as she entered quietly, carrying warm bread and brewed herbs. Calista blinked and quickly sat up. She didn't want anyone, not even Kira, to see the shining brightness in her eyes or the gentle curve of her lips. Happiness was a dangerous luxury in Valkorn, especially for her. Kira tilted her head. "You look radiant. Did you sleep well? More than well." She felt reborn in some strange, indescribable way. "I didn't sleep much," Calista lied softly, hiding her smile behind the rim of her cup. "But I feel fine." She wasn't fine. She was floating. But floating wasn't a safe thing in Valkorn. Floating made you visible, and visibility meant danger. Before Calista could say another word, A heavy knock thundered against the tower door. Kira jolted, almost dropping the tray. A guard's voice boomed. The heir is summoned. Elder Kael requests her presence immediately. Callista's breath stilled. Her good mood evaporated like mist burned by fire. Tell him she's preparing, Kira snapped, marching to the door. Elder Kael said now, the guard insisted. He does not tolerate delay this morning. Calista stood. It's fine, Kira, but it wasn't. It was far from fine. Kael never summoned her this early unless he was angry, unless he wanted control, unless something about her threatened. Her fingers tightened around her dress as Kira draped a cloak over her shoulders. Be careful. He's in a dangerous mood today. He hardly slept. Calista nodded, even though her stomach twisted. She walked down the winding steps of the tower, past walls she'd memorized since childhood, and entered the main halls of the palace. The tension was immediate. Soldiers sprinting, nobles whispering, servants carrying scrolls and weapons instead of plates and flowers. Everything smelled of fear. When she reached the throne hall, 2 guards pushed the heavy doors open. Kael stood in the center, surrounded by council members, his back to her. His dark hair was disheveled, his shoulders tense, his breathing sharp. His cloak lay discarded on the floor, and the shattered remains of a wine goblet sparkled across the marble. He had destroyed something, or someone, recently. Calista, he said without turning. Her entire spine stiffened at the sound of his voice, deep, cold, edged with barely restrained fury. She stepped forward, bowing slightly. Elder Kael, he turned then. His eyes were shadowed, pupils sharp, jaw tight. He looked her up and down as if searching for cracks, clues, secrets beneath her skin. She hated that gaze. She hated him. But she kept her face calm. You screamed last night, Kael said. The guards heard you, the council murmured. Calista swallowed, steadying her breath. I slipped in the bath. Kael stepped closer, too close, his presence suffocating, towering. You slipped. Yes, funny, he murmured, because the guards said they heard something else. Panic. Fear. Her throat tightened. She forced a shrug. I was startled, nothing more. Kael circled her slowly like a predator stalking prey. His fingers brushed her hair, tucking a strand behind her ear. The touch made her stomach twist in disgust, yet she didn't move. I need you, he whispered, to tell me the truth. Her breath faltered. She couldn't tell him the truth. Damien Blackthorn would be hunted, tortured, killed, and Kael's obsession with her would twist into something darker, something harsher. She didn't know why she was protecting the stranger. Instinct, connection, destiny. She didn't know, but she would protect him. There is no truth to tell, she said quietly, only that you woke the entire palace because you lost a crown. The council stiffened at her words. Kael's jaw clenched so hard she heard the grind of his teeth. What did you say? He whispered. You're angry, Calista answered softly. You always are. I'm used to it. Something flickered in his eyes. Irritation, ego, possession. He stepped even closer, his breath brushing her cheek. You are mine, he murmured. Your reactions, your fear, your safety, everything about you. So when I hear you scream, I come. Calista didn't breathe, didn't blink, didn't move. She simply stared into his face. And then slowly, deliberately, she smiled. A wicked, sharp, knowing smile. A smile Kael had never seen on her before. It made him freeze. It made him narrow his eyes. It made suspicion curl through him like poison. What, he said slowly, are you smiling about? Calista tilted her head. I don't know. Maybe I'm just amused that the great Elder Kael lost control over one little crown. A ripple went through the council. Kael's nostrils flared. You dare. But a council member interrupted, stepping forward. Elder Kael, he said anxiously, with respect. Valkorn demands answers about the stolen relics. The crown is only one of the items missing. We must— No, Kael snapped. We must discuss the succession, the leadership of Valkorn. With all due respect, another counselor said firmly, the kingdom is in danger. The people want the stolen treasures found first. The crown is sacred. This takes precedence. Kael's fury sharpened. They question your leadership, Calista murmured softly, almost innocently, but Kael heard it clearly and whipped his head toward her. Leave, he commanded through clenched teeth, his control slipping. Calista bowed gracefully. As you wish. She turned and walked out, her steps slow, deliberate, elegant. Kael watched her go, the sway of her hair, the calm in her spine, the unshaken confidence she suddenly carried. Something was wrong. Something was different. The timid, quiet, obedient Calista was gone, replaced by someone with fire in her eyes, and secrets she wasn't sharing. He felt it, he hated it, and he would uncover it, whatever it meant, whatever the cost. As Calista ascended the tower steps again, heart pounding, adrenaline thrumming through her veins, she smiled to herself, breathless, shaken, excited. Not from fear, but from the memory of a man who wasn't Kael. A man with ocean blue eyes, a man named Damien Blackthorn. And for the first time in her life, Calista didn't feel trapped in Valkorn. She felt dangerous. She felt alive. Chapter 8. Night of Violation. Night had settled over Valkorn like a suffocating velvet cloak, the moon casting pale silver slivers of light across the jagged rooftops of the palace. From her high tower chamber, Calista could hear the distant clang of swords and shouted commands as guards continued their relentless search for the stolen crown. But even that chaos seemed muted compared to the turmoil that awaited her within the walls of her own room. The door to her chamber creaked open, and a familiar, oppressive shadow filled the doorway. Elder Kael stepped inside, the weight of his presence dragging the air down like chains. His dark eyes, almost black in the moonlight, glimmered with anger and an unmistakable possessiveness. The guards outside had not been enough to contain his wrath. He had come for her, as he always did, and his sole purpose tonight was to assert his control, to remind her, to terrify her, that in Valkorn she was nothing more than property. Callista's stomach twisted with a mixture of fear, dread, and simmering anger. She had seen the lust and the violent obsession in Kael's eyes countless times, yet each encounter shredded her a little more, like fragile parchment being torn apart by unforgiving hands. She tried to steel herself, tried to summon the courage that had carried her through years of imprisonment and abuse, but every fiber of her being screamed that resistance would only lead to more pain. "You're awake," Kael murmured, his voice low, measured, but dripping with dark anticipation. "I can smell your fear from here." Callista's hands trembled slightly at her sides. I'm tired, Elder Kael. Please, not tonight." His jaw tightened. "Not tonight? The kingdom is in chaos, Calista. The crown is stolen. The people whisper. And yet you lie here, like some useless child. You belong to this family, to this kingdom, and more importantly, to me. You will obey." The words were like ice shattering in her chest. Obey, always obey. Every month, every day, every hour, her life was a litany of obedience. There was never choice. There was never freedom. Only the chains of Kael's control, forged by fear and reinforced by the council's silence. She swallowed hard, backing toward the edge of her bed, her porcelain skin paling under the dim light. "I won't." "You will," he cut her off, his voice a whip crack in the heavy room. His long fingers grasped her shoulders, pinning her with terrifying strength. Calista struggled, kicking, twisting, screaming, but Kael was relentless, his power and skill honed over years of domination leaving her helpless. Her cries echoed through the chamber, bouncing off the cold stone walls, but they were meaningless. Outside, the guards ignored the sounds, as always. They had been trained to see only compliance, and fear had long been drilled into their hearts. "Stop it, please," she screamed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm not yours to take." Kael's expression hardened, his mouth tightening into a cruel line. "You are my princess, my possession. You exist to produce an heir for Valkorn, nothing more. And tonight, like every night, you will remember your place." Every word stabbed at her soul, leaving invisible bruises that would ache for weeks, months, years. And yet beneath the crushing weight of despair, a fire flickered, a small, dangerous ember of defiance. Each violation, each act of control reminded her why she could never truly surrender. After what seemed like hours of torment, Kael finally left, his footsteps retreating down the marble hall. The door clicked shut, leaving a suffocating silence behind. Calista collapsed onto the bed, shivering, her body trembling from the combination of fear, rage, and humiliation. Her eyes were raw, red-rimmed from crying, and her chest heaved as she tried to catch her breath. For hours, she lay curled in the corner of her bed, imagining hundreds of daggers plunging into Kael's heart. In her mind, every strike was perfect, precise, righteous. She imagined the color draining from his face, the shock and disbelief as she claimed what had always been denied to her: power, freedom, vengeance. By the time the first faint streaks of dawn began to cut across the sky, she forced herself to rise. Kira entered quietly, her handmaidens following, eyes wide with helpless concern. They had long since learned that nothing they could do would stop Kael. All they could do was bear witness, and even that tore at their hearts. Calista walked silently to the bathhouse, her bare feet padding against the cold stone floors. The smell of lavender and vanilla wafted through the room, familiar yet comforting. Kira prepared the milk bath as she always did, pouring it gently into the pool, scattering rose petals on the surface. Calista stepped in, letting the warmth envelope her aching muscles, her body still reeling from Kael's invasion. She closed her eyes, the soft petals brushing against her fingertips, and for the first time in years, allowed herself to think of someone else. Someone whose touch was not violent, whose gaze did not strip away her soul. Damien Blackthorn. She pictured his piercing blue eyes, the strength in his frame, the silent calm he had brought to her world. How different he was from Kael. How gentle. How alive. Tears rolled down her cheeks, hot and bitter, and Kira, unable to speak, simply held her hand, offering the smallest comfort a handmaiden could provide in a world of monsters. Calista scrubbed herself until her skin was raw, the motion mechanical, almost ritualistic. Each stroke was a silent prayer, a scream, a vow. She would survive. She would endure. And one day she would be free. For hours, she stayed submerged in the milk, letting the warmth cradle her, while her mind replayed the events over and over, building fury and determination. She was tired of being a pawn, tired of being broken, tired of being a shadow of herself in the hands of a man who would never see her as human, only as property. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine something impossible, a life without Kael, a life where her red hair flowed in the forests of Sintra, where no one commanded her, where the world was hers to touch, to feel, to live in. The memory of Damien lingered in every thought, a delicate, intoxicating contrast to Kael's cruelty. By the time she emerged, wrapped in a towel, her body red from scrubbing, her spirit a mixture of exhaustion and renewed purpose, something inside her had shifted irrevocably. She would endure, yes, but not forever. The chains of her life had not yet broken, but she had begun to see the cracks. And somewhere beyond the tower walls, someone who had looked at her with blue eyes that burned into her soul, waited. And for the first time in years, Calista allowed herself hope. Hope that one day she would reclaim what Kael had stolen. Hope that she would no longer tremble beneath the hands of monsters. Hope that she would see freedom, even if it came at the cost of everything else. The sun rose over Valkorn, its golden rays spilling into the tower, illuminating her red hair like flames. Calista sat at her window, staring at the kingdom below, fists clenched, mind racing. The stolen crown, the chaos, Kael's violent grip, Damien's gaze. It all swirled together into a single, intoxicating clarity. She would survive this night. She would endure this life. And she would find a way to break free, even if it killed her. Chapter 9. Thinking of Blue Eyes. Calista sat by her high tower window, the cold wind brushing her cheeks as if trying to reach into her soul. Outside, the moonlight painted the rooftops of Valkorn in silver, and the palace gardens shimmered faintly under its glow. But no beauty, no silver light, could reach the part of her heart that had been long buried in fear, loneliness, and a life of cold command. And yet, she could not bury the memory of him. Not truly. Damien Blackthorn. The name alone made her chest tighten. His piercing blue eyes haunted her thoughts, images replaying endlessly, the way the moonlight had caught in his dark wet hair in the bathhouse, the dripping milk outlining the strength of his sculpted body, the bold confidence in his movements that contrasted so violently against Kael's violent obsession. And yet, beyond the heat and tension, there was something she could not name, a strange sense of safety, a fleeting comfort she had never known. She pressed her palms against the cold glass of the window, her reflection a ghostly image of pale skin and flaming hair. Why do I feel this pull? She wondered. Her lips trembled, almost forming words she dared not say aloud. Her eyes searched the darkened gardens below, the torchlight of the guards flickering across the hedges, the roses, the gravel paths. She half hoped, half feared, that she might see him again. "Kira," she whispered, almost to herself. "Have you heard anything?" The handmaiden approached quietly, a soft frown tugging at her lips. "I've asked around, Princess, but no one has seen anyone matching his description. He's like a ghost in the night. Calista waved her off gently, though her stomach twisted. "It's nothing. Perhaps it's better this way." Yet the image of those ocean blue eyes remained, burning in her mind. Kira's tone softened, teasing lightly to ease the tension she knew must be unbearable. "You've been staring at that window for hours, Princess. Perhaps you're falling in love with a phantom." Callista's cheeks flamed. She refused to admit the truth, but beneath the shame and embarrassment, a quiet ache of longing stirred. She tried to shake it off, focusing on her hands, the folds of her flowing gown, the faint fragrance of lavender from the window ledge. "I'm not thinking of anyone, Kira. Stop teasing me." Yet her thoughts betrayed her. Every corner of her mind seemed to whisper his name, every shadow in the garden reminded her of his presence. It was impossible, infuriating and intoxicating all at once. Unexpectedly, Kael's command came that morning. She was to take a walk in the palace garden, under heavy guard, though the order carried a strange undertone of showmanship. Certain council members were passing through the grounds that day, and Kael clearly intended for them to observe the princess, to remind them that she remained without a wolf, that her power was incomplete, and that their deliberations over her reign were not yet finished. Calista hesitated. She had grown accustomed to the towers, the locked corridors, the suffocating predictability of her life. But Kira's gentle encouragement and the faint hint of rebellion in her heart spurred her forward. "Very well," she murmured. "Let's go, Kira." The handmaidens worked quietly to dress her in a soft, flowing gown of pale cream, the fabric light and airy, brushing against her skin like whispers. Her long, wavy red hair cascaded over her shoulders, catching the morning light as she stepped from the cool shadows of the tower into the crisp air of the garden. The handmaidens worked quietly to dress her in a soft, flowing gown of pale cream, the fabric light and airy, brushing against her skin like whispers. Her long, wavy red hair cascaded over her shoulders, catching the morning light as she stepped from the cool shadows of the tower into the crisp air of the garden. The roses stretched beside her, their blossoms glowing with dewdrops that caught the sun's early rays. Kira walked close, her hands occasionally brushing Callista's as they moved down the gravel path. "Your mother loved these roses," Kira said softly, trying to draw her attention from her racing thoughts. "She would often spend hours here, just like you, gazing at the sky." Callista's lips pressed into a thin line. "I wonder, if she had known what I would face, would she still have smiled at the flowers?" "She would have," Kira replied firmly, with the gentle certainty of someone who had watched the princess suffer and endure for far too long. "Your parents, they gave birth to a daughter stronger than they could ever imagine." For a few moments, the world seemed lighter. The air smelled sweet with roses and soil, and the soft chatter of Kira reminded her of something almost normal. When Kira wandered off to fetch a cutter to snip a few flowers for the princess, the garden seemed to stretch endlessly, the shadows deepening under the rose bushes and the large ancient trees. And then she heard it, a rustle. A subtle shift of leaves that sounded entirely out of place among the disciplined movements of the guards and the whispering wind. Calista froze mid-step, her pulse accelerating. "Who's there?" she whispered, though her voice trembled with more hope than fear. From behind the trunk of a tall, twisted oak, a figure emerged. Tall, muscular, cloaked in shadows yet moving with a deliberate grace that made him seem unreal. And then, as if the world had tilted on its axis, those eyes met hers, ocean blue, piercing, impossible. Her gasp tore from her lips, sharp and involuntary, filling the space between the roses and the gravel paths. "Princess," he said softly, his voice carrying across the garden, calm and steady, yet weighted with unspoken tension. Callista's hand flew to her chest, her heartbeat thrumming painfully in her ears. Damien, the name was barely more than a breath, but it carried the weight of years of longing and despair, of fear turned fragile hope. Her handmaidens, stationed discreetly nearby under Kael's orders, subtly kept watch. Their eyes darted between the guards and the figure in the shadows, but they wisely stayed silent, giving Calista the first taste of real freedom she had felt in years. Damien stepped closer, the soft crunch of gravel under his boots sounding impossibly loud to Calista. His presence was commanding, yet gentle, like a tide pulling her towards safety after a lifetime of storms. "You shouldn't be here," she said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the rapid thrum of her heart. "If Kael finds you, if the guards..." He shook his head, a faint smile brushing his lips. "I won't hurt you, princess, not ever. I only came to see you, to make sure you knew there's someone out there who sees you for more than what they say you are." Callista's eyes brimmed with tears. The garden seemed to shrink around her, the roses fading into the background. For the first time in a very long time, she smiled. A small smile, timid and fragile, but real. A smile that carried hope, recognition, and the weight of possibility. I don't understand," she whispered. "Why are you here? Why?" He lifted a hand, gently brushing a stray curl from her face. "Because Valkorn took too much from both of us, princess. But tonight you're allowed to breathe." For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. The sun rose higher, glinting off the dew, and Calista realized something she had long thought impossible. In a world where she had known only fear, only control, and only pain, there existed a single moment of freedom, a single moment where she could choose to hope. Her handmaidens watched silently from the shadows, and Damien's gaze never left hers. A promise lingered in his eyes, unspoken but clear, that he would return, that he would not abandon her, and that he would fight in his own way against the monsters that had ruled her life for far too long. And in that quiet morning, amidst the roses, the wind, and the distant clamor of the palace, Calista felt something shift deep inside her. A spark of life, a spark of rebellion, and most dangerously, a spark of desire that refused to be denied. For the first time in 17 years, Calista allowed herself to believe that maybe she could be free, and maybe, just maybe, she could love again. Chapter 10. Telling Her Pain. The garden was alive with shadows under the pale moonlight, the ancient hedges and tall trees forming a labyrinthine maze around them. Callista's heart pounded as she walked beside Damien, their footsteps soft on the gravel path, the scent of roses mingling with the cool night air. She could feel the tension in him, the quiet strength radiating from every step he took. Yet there was patience there too, a patience she had never known, a safety she had never felt. "You shouldn't be here," she murmured at first, glancing over her shoulder, though her voice lacked its usual edge of fear. "If someone sees you—" "They won't," he interrupted softly, his ocean blue eyes locking on hers. "I won't let anyone hurt you, Princess. Not again." She looked down, biting her lower lip, trying to hold back the flood of emotions that always seemed to rise when he was near. I've lived like this for so long, Damien. You don't know. I can feel it," he said, stepping closer, closing the distance between them. His presence was overwhelming in the cool night, strong and steady yet careful, as if he feared breaking her fragile state. "Tell me, please. I want to understand." Callista's hands curled around the folds of her gown as she led him through a narrow passage of hedges. I'm trapped. In a tower, alone. Kael, he—" Her voice faltered, the words heavy, choked with pain. "He says I must obey him, that I must give him a child. He touches me, forces me, and I can't fight him without becoming worse off. I've tried to resist. I've screamed, cried. I've begged. But no one can stop him. He controls everything." Damien's jaw tightened, the anger rising in his expression as he listened. His fists curled, knuckles whitening in the dim light. "That monster," he spat, voice low, barely controlled, yet the venom in it could have shattered stone. "He's done this all these years?" Callista's lips trembled. "For 17 years, since I was 5. No one protected me. My wolf never came. They all said I was less, incomplete, cursed even. The council, everyone. They all let him do this because they fear him more than they care for me. I feel broken, Damien, angry, hopeless. Everything inside me is hollow." Her voice cracked, the tears threatening to fall. He reached out instinctively, brushing a strand of fiery red hair from her face, his fingers warm and gentle against her pale skin. "You are not broken, Princess. You are stronger than they'll ever understand. Stronger than anyone has ever known." Calista shook her head, the anger flaring up alongside the vulnerability. "Do you understand? I can't even walk freely in my own garden without guards watching, without Kael making sure I never taste freedom. I've never run through the forests of Sintra. I've never felt the wind on my face without fear. I've never lived." Her confession hung in the air, fragile and raw. Damien took a careful step closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from his body, the subtle, irresistible pull that made her heart beat violently against her chest. "And that is all you want?" he asked softly, almost reverently. "To run, to feel, to live?" Calista nodded, her hands trembling. "Yes, that's all I've ever wanted. To be free to run, to feel alive." Her voice was barely above a whisper, yet Damien caught every word, every tremor of her longing, her pain. He inhaled sharply, the action deep and deliberate, and Calista froze. "What?" she murmured. "I can smell it," he said, his voice thick with disbelief and awe. "Your wolf. It's not gone, not absent. It's suppressed. You've been rejecting it yourself, Princess. All these years unconsciously because of the trauma, the fear, the abuse. You've blocked it out. But it's there, waiting for you." Callista's breath hitched, her knees weakening. She had never imagined such a thing. Her entire identity, the very thing that defined her as a royal, a wolf-born, a princess of Valkorn, collapsed in that moment. Every lie she had believed about herself, every fear, every limitation, it shattered. "You mean it's been me?" she whispered, her voice shaking. I've been the one holding myself back?" He nodded, his expression softening. Yes. You've been protecting yourself, but not from them, from yourself, from the power you were meant to wield. Tears pooled in Callista's eyes, her chest tightening. For the first time, she felt a strange mixture of vulnerability and hope, an unbearable weight of realization and an unspoken promise. And what now? What do I do? Damien reached out, gently cupping her cheek, thumb brushing away a stray tear. Now, you begin to remember who you are. You begin to reclaim what is yours, what has always been yours, your wolf, your power, your freedom, and I will help you. I promise, Princess. I won't let them take this from you again. Callista's lips parted, her voice trembling as the emotion overwhelmed her. I want to believe you. I want to run, Damien. I want to be free. You will, he whispered, closing the distance, his forehead resting against hers. The scent of him, the strength, the safety. It wrapped around her like a protective shield, and for the first time in years, Calista allowed herself to feel, allowed herself to hope. The garden seemed to fade around them. The moonlight caught in Damien's dark hair, and Callista's red curls shimmered like fire in the night. The roses smelled sweeter, the air warmer, the shadows less suffocating, and in that shared silence, a silent vow passed between them, a vow of freedom, of rebellion, of life. Together, she asked, her voice barely audible, but the question carried all the weight of her fear and hope. Together, he replied, a faint smile breaking through the tension in his jaw. I'll show you the forests of Sintra. I'll show you what it means to be free. And I'll stay by your side, no matter what stands against you. Calista felt her knees weaken, but she held herself upright, the first real spark of determination igniting in her chest. For the first time, she understood. She was not powerless. She was not alone. And perhaps, just perhaps, the life she had longed for her entire existence was finally within reach. The blue of his eyes met hers once more, and in that moment the impossible felt real. The pull between them, magnetic and undeniable, surged through her. And for the first time in 17 years, Calista allowed herself to imagine a life beyond Kael's tyranny. A life of freedom, of love, and of her own choosing. Chapter 11. Damien's Dark Past. The garden of Valkorn stretched endlessly in the moonlight, a maze of roses, tall hedges, and shadowed paths. Each turn seemed more alive than the last, bathed in silver light, but tonight it held no danger, at least not the kind Calista had known her entire life. Tonight, for the first time in years, she walked with a companion who did not command, threaten, or dominate her. She walked with someone who made her heart pound, not with fear, but with curiosity, desire, and a strange, impossible hope. Damien matched her pace, silent but present, his tall, muscular frame casting long shadows across the gravel paths. His eyes, ocean blue and impossibly piercing, occasionally scanned the dark hedges as if expecting danger, but never for a moment did they waver from her. Who are you, really? Calista asked, her voice trembling softly. Her hands fiddled with the folds of her gown as she kept her eyes lowered, though she felt every inch of him near her. The man I see. It's unlike anyone I've ever met. Damien's lips curled in a small, wry smile, shadowed by the pain lurking behind his gaze. A thief, Princess, he said lightly, as if joking, though his voice carried the weight of centuries. A thief by name, not by choice. A man who lost everything Valkorn could take, and more. Calista looked up at him, curiosity mingling with caution. Lost everything, she whispered. He shook his head slowly, the motion heavy with memory. I had someone once, someone I loved, someone who was to be mine. Kael took her from me. His jaw clenched as he spoke, dark rage igniting in his eyes. He murdered her before I could even mark her, before I could claim her as mine. I wasn't there to stop him. I failed her." Callista's chest tightened, her eyes filling with silent tears. She had known Kael's cruelty, but hearing of Damien's loss, seeing the raw, burning anger in him, made her feel a strange connection, a shared grief that neither had expected. I am so sorry," she whispered, voice breaking. "I pray for her, that her soul finds peace." Damien's eyes softened as he looked at her, a rare vulnerability shining through the storm of fury that usually surrounded him. He watched her closely, admiration and something tender flickering there, a softness she had never seen from any man, not even Kael. Their shared sorrow, the depth of pain, seemed to bridge a chasm neither thought could be crossed. "I can show you freedom, Calista," he said, finally taking a small step closer, his voice low and deliberate. "Not just outside the palace walls, not just the garden. The real world, the forests, the rivers, the wind on your face, the sky above Sintra, open and endless. I can show you everything you've never been allowed to see." Her eyes widened slightly, heart racing at the thought, yet fear laced her hope. I want to escape Damien, more than anything, but Kael, he'll hunt me, he'll never let me go." Damien's gaze was unwavering, burning with a promise. "I will protect you. From Kael, from anyone who dares touch you, I swear it. You will not be harmed while I stand with you." Calista swallowed hard, doubt mixing with longing. I cannot leave without Kira. She's like a sister to me. She's the only person who's stayed by my side, who's kept me from completely losing myself." He smiled faintly, nodding. "I will take care of her too. She will be safe. You have my word." For a long moment, they walked in silence, the gravel crunching softly beneath their feet, the roses swaying gently in the midnight breeze. Then Damien stopped, his piercing eyes capturing hers with a gravity that made her stomach twist. He stepped closer, closing the distance until she could feel his breath ghosting over her porcelain skin. His hand extended slowly, brushing against hers, but he did not take it yet. Letting her decide, letting her feel the pull of choice, the power of her own will. "Do you want to leave?" he asked, voice slow, deliberate, firm, yet not demanding. "Do you want to run from this cage? From everything holding you here?" Her heart thundered in her chest, and the air around them seemed to thicken, charged with emotion and unspoken tension. She hesitated only for a heartbeat, feeling the weight of years of fear pressing down on her. But then, looking into those impossibly blue eyes, feeling the promise and the safety in his presence, the longing she had buried for so long rose up like a tidal wave. "Yes," she whispered, finally trembling, but her voice carried something it had not in years, conviction. "Yes, I want to leave. I want freedom." Damien's lips curved into a small victorious smile, his eyes shining with a rare warmth. "Then you shall have it, princess. I vow to free you from this cage. No chains, no walls, no monsters. Nothing will hold you while I breathe." Calista felt a surge of hope and fear collide within her, a strange exhilaration that made her breath hitch. For the first time she believed in possibility, in escape, in life, in something beyond Kael's cruelty. The velvet night seemed to embrace them, the scent of roses and damp earth mingling with the promise of a new beginning. Calista felt a spark ignite deep within her chest, the first glimmer of strength and courage she had known in 17 years. Her mind raced with dreams she had buried for too long, the wind through the forests of Sintra, the open sky, the sound of rivers rushing past, freedom. And for the first time in her life, she could see it. Not as an impossible dream, but as a reality waiting for her to step into. Damien's hand tightened around hers, a silent vow passing between them. The moonlight caught in his hair, and Callista's fiery curls shimmered like embers, the shadows around them dissolving into the night. And in that shared silence, under the vast open sky, a plan, a dangerous, desperate plan, began to take shape. The cage she had known all her life was finally starting to crack. Chapter 12. A Spark. After years of darkness. The moon hung low over Valkorn, shrouded in drifting mist that coiled like silver serpents around the castle walls. The garden slept under its glow, a maze of dark hedges, star-shaped flowers, and whispering vines that swayed gently as though reacting to the presence of the two souls walking through it. Calista and Damien. They stood in the heart of the enchanted maze, the only place in Valkorn where the world seemed to pause. The night air carried the perfume of blooming night roses, their petals glowing faintly. Fireflies blinked like scattered embers, and every step they took seemed to echo deeper than the last. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, saying nothing. The wind picked up. And petals, soft, fragile, weightless, lifted from the blossoming vines overhead and began to swirl around them in slow, spiraling currents. Pink, ivory, and violet petals drifted between them, brushing against their skin like a blessing the world had withheld from them for years. Callista's breath hitched. She didn't know if it was the wind or Damien's nearness or the freedom she suddenly felt breathing inside her for the first time in so long. But something shifted inside her chest. Damien stepped closer, slowly, deliberately. His eyes stayed locked on hers, like he was searching for something she didn't realize she had been hiding all along. The warmth radiating from his body pushed against the coldness that had lived in her bones for years. She felt alive, awake, seen. The gap between them narrowed. The petals flowed more wildly, dancing around their silhouettes as if the garden were witnessing what no one else had ever dared to see. A spark in the heart of a girl who had died inside long ago. Damien lifted a hand, brushing a stray curl from her cheek. Calista inhaled sharply, her chest trembling. He leaned in. Their lips were inches apart, breaths merging, hearts pounding in rhythms they didn't yet understand. Callista's eyes fluttered half-closed. Then, a loud throat-clearing broke the air. Kira, standing with her hands on her hips, eyes wide with disbelief and her mouth hanging open. Calista jerked back slightly, her cheeks burning. Damien's jaw flexed with irritation, but then he let out a soft, amused exhale. Kira blinked, then blinked again. "Am I interrupting something?" she asked, her voice cracking as she tried and failed to sound normal. Calista opened her mouth, but words tangled in her throat. Damien spoke instead. Calm, composed, unfazed. To a degree, he said. Kira looked between them like she was witnessing a sin. "My princess, oh heavens!" Damien stepped forward, lowering his voice so only Calista could hear. "Tell her to place a torch at the window of the bathhouse," he murmured. "The day you decide to leave this life behind, and join me outside Valkorn." Callista's breath stopped. His voice was not demanding, but firm, solid, a vow in itself, a signal, a plan, a way out. Before she could reply, Damien's expression softened with something almost tender, almost protective, and then his form disappeared into the shadows between the hedges, leaving only the faintest ripple in the air. He was gone. Calista stood rooted, feeling the ghost of warmth where his breath had touched her skin, and for the first time in years filled with fear and silence and suffocation, something new bloomed inside her. Happiness. A fragile, trembling, disbelieving happiness that curled in her chest like a timid flame. She didn't smile often anymore, but now a small smile tugged at her lips, weak but real, uncertain but present, a thin crack in the wall around her heart. Kira caught it instantly. Her eyes widened. "Calista, what happened to you out here?" Calista shook her head softly, unable or unwilling to speak. The happiness felt as delicate as a glass flower. She feared words might shatter it. Kira reached out and gently squeezed her hand. "Whatever it is, you look different, alive." Calista didn't answer. She didn't need to. The spark in her eyes said enough. When Kael pushed open the doors to her chamber hours later, he expected to find her trembling, crying, or curled defensively as she usually was. But Calista lay still on the bed, the sheets drawn neatly around her body. Her face held no fear, no disgust, no defiance, just emptiness. A quiet emptiness. Kael hesitated, thrown off balance. This wasn't how she behaved, this wasn't how she looked at him. Her silence unsettled him, but his lust, twisted and ever-present, overpowered the momentary confusion. He climbed on top of her. Calista didn't scream. She didn't claw at him, or sob, or try to fight him off. She simply stared past him, at the canopy above, at nothing, letting her mind drift somewhere far, far away. Somewhere with moonlit gardens, and a thief with midnight eyes, who smelled her wolf, and promised her freedom. Kael finished quickly as he always did, but when he rose off her, loosening his grip and sliding away, he paused. Calista looked up at him, and smiled, not with warmth, not with affection, not even with hatred, but a wicked, haunting smile that made his blood run cold, a smile that said, "I know something you don't." Kael's nostrils flared. "What is that look?" Calista said nothing, but her smile remained. Kael stood slowly, suspicion slithering into every bone in his body. Something was happening to her, something he did not control, and that terrified him more than anything. In the days that followed, Kael became a storm of paranoia. He doubled the guard patrols, tripled the checkpoints in the corridors, restricted her visits to the council, claiming she was unwell, and he interrogated her handmaidens, especially Kira, with growing aggression. Everyone noticed the change. Kael's obsession thickened into madness, like grease filling the cracks of the castle. Calista, meanwhile, drifted through the days in a haze of quiet dread and hidden hope. Then it happened. Calista sat on her bed one morning, hands trembling. "Kira," she whispered. Kira looked up from tidying the wardrobe. "Yes, my princess. I haven't bled this month." Kira froze. Her eyes widened, but she kept her composure, stepping closer. "It could be stress, Calista. You've been through—" Calista shook her head violently. Tears spilled. Her shoulders trembled. "Kira, you know what it means." Kira swallowed hard. "We don't know yet." She knelt beside Calista, taking her hands, trying to steady her breathing. But the truth hung between them, heavy and undeniable. Calista broke. She cried, sobbing into her palms, shaking, gasping for air. "Kira." "He will kill me," Calista whispered. "If I carry his child, he'll kill me and feed my body to rogues, and he'll take the baby, because once he has my baby, he won't need to keep me around." Kira closed her eyes, her own tears pooling. Calista pressed a trembling hand to her abdomen. "It would still be my child," she whispered. "My baby." Her voice cracked into pieces. The day passed painfully, with Callista's sobs echoing through the room, with Kira trying to hold her together, with fear thicker than the air they breathed. And tomorrow, the physicians would come. Tomorrow she might know for certain whether she carried the child of the man she despised most. Night arrived, but Calista couldn't sleep. She lay awake, replaying every word Damien had spoken in the garden, every look, every breath, every promise. His pain, his darkness, his vow to destroy Kael, his oath to protect her, to protect Kira, to take her beyond Valkorn, to show her Sintra. Forests, skies, freedom. Calista imagined running barefoot across the forest floor, the wind catching her hair, sunlight warming her skin. A life without chains, a life without Kael. She pictured Damien beside her, not touching her, not pushing her, just walking, present, safe, solid. A strange warmth spread through her chest. Not lust, not fantasy, not delusion, but connection. A deep, quiet, unexplainable connection to the one man who had looked at her without cruelty, without expectation, without wanting to devour her. A spark she hadn't felt in years. And for the first time in her life, Calista dared to imagine a future that didn't involve fear, a future that belonged to her, a future she would choose, even if it meant running, even if it meant fighting, even if it meant lighting a torch at the window of the bathhouse. She stared at the moon and whispered into the darkness, "Damien, I want to be free," and the spark inside her glowed brighter. Chapter 13. The Suppressed Wolf Within. The morning passed in a fog of dread, but by early afternoon, sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Callista's chamber, painting the marble floor in soft gold. It should have felt warm, comforting, but instead Calista felt chilled to the bone, for today was the day. The physicians were coming. Kira paced the room, wringing her hands so hard the skin around her knuckles turned white. Calista sat at the edge of her bed, her fingers intertwined tightly, her heart beating in an erratic rhythm she struggled to control. A knock echoed against the oak doors. Kira flinched. Calista swallowed hard. Then 3 royal physicians entered, all dressed in formal robes, carrying their polished wooden boxes filled with instruments and elixirs. Their expressions were stiff, professional, but Calista felt their eyes lingering on her too long, as though they could already sense something was out of order. "Princess Calista," the eldest physician said with a stiff bow, "we will begin now." Calista nodded, though her throat tightened painfully. Kira stood close, protective like a small shield against the world. But she could not shield Calista from this. The physician sat up quickly, checking her pulse, her temperature, her scent, taking blood, pressing lightly against her abdomen as she tensed and struggled not to shake. A long silence filled the room as they exchanged glances over their notes. Some glances sharp, others hesitant, others almost startled, as though the truth, the possibility hung right beneath their fingertips. Then the eldest physician inhaled deeply. "There may be a complication." Kira reacted instantly, stepping forward. "She bled last week," she said quickly, almost too quickly. The 2 physicians exchanged looks. Calista turned sharply to Kira, startled, but Kira didn't meet her eyes. Her voice trembled, but she held her ground. "We washed her linens ourselves. The bleeding was normal." The head physician frowned. "That is surprising. The initial readings suggest otherwise." Callista's breath caught in her throat. "Then test again," Kira insisted, her hands shaking behind her back. "You know how delicate her health has been. She is always irregular." Her voice was bold, but the fear behind her words flickered like a candle in a storm. The physicians hesitated a moment more before agreeing. Another test, another vial of blood, another press of instruments to her skin. More whispers exchanged over sealed scrolls. When they finished, the eldest cleared his throat. "We will review the results carefully," he said, "and send our formal conclusion to Elder Kael the day after tomorrow." Callista's stomach dropped. A day after tomorrow. Every breath she took felt too loud, too sharp, too dangerous. The physicians departed with stiff bows and boots, clicking across the stone floors. The door closed behind them with an ominous thud. Silence settled. Calista finally exhaled, and then her body broke. She curled forward, pressing her trembling hands to her face as tears spilled through her fingers. Kira knelt beside her instantly, wrapping her arms around Calista, holding her as tightly as she could. Callista's voice was shredded. "Kira, what am I going to do? If Kael learns I'm pregnant, he'll kill me." Kira closed her eyes painfully. "I know." Calista shook violently. "He'll kill me, and he'll take the baby. He'll use it. He'll raise it to become like him." Kira's grip tightened. "Don't think of that. We don't know anything yet. I don't want to wait around to find out for myself." But deep down, they both knew. And deep down, Calista felt something else entirely. Something new, something pulsing beneath her skin. A strange awakening. Later that afternoon, as Calista sat alone by the balcony, trying desperately to calm herself, she suddenly froze. A sound, a faint click. so soft it was almost dust falling on stone. Yet somehow she heard it clearly, painfully. Her ears twitched, straining. 2 guards were speaking on the lower terrace, voices hushed, but she heard every word as though they were right beside her. The physicians seemed worried. Kael won't like this. The baby matters more than the heir. He'll dispose of her if... Calista gasped, covering her ears. The voices were too sharp, too clear, echoing in her skull like amplified whispers. Her breath hitched. What is happening? Her vision sharpened next. Everything became too crisp, too defined. She could see the dust particles floating, the pulse in her wrist, the flutter of a moth's wings 3 meters away, and then a jolt, a flash of instinct, a primal surge running from her spine to her fingertips. A wolf's instinct, her wolf. She staggered back, gripping the railing. No. Her wolf, the wolf she never had, the wolf she believed was missing, dead, broken. It stirred, it pushed, it breathed inside her. She clutched her chest, shaking violently. Not now, not yet. Kael would sense it. If he found out she was pregnant and her wolf was awakening, he would kill her immediately. Calista tried to steady her breath, forcing the wolf deep down, pushing it into the dark corner of her mind. But it pushed back. Later, Kira returned with broth and blankets. Calista forced herself to act normal. She sat calmly. She smiled weakly. She pretended her heart wasn't pounding like a drum in her ears. Kira didn't notice. Or maybe she did, but thought it was just fear. Calista nodded along to Kira's reassurances. But her hearing was too sharp. She heard her own heartbeat, Kira's heartbeat, the clink of dishes 3 rooms away. Her senses were exploding. She wanted to tell Kira. She wanted to collapse into her arms and whisper, "My wolf is waking. I feel her. I'm changing." But if Kira reacted, if her eyes widened, if she gasped, Kael's spies would notice. So Calista kept silent, her secret curled inside her like a flame. The door burst open with no warning. Calista didn't even flinch. She sensed him coming seconds earlier, felt the heavy pressure of his presence like a dark fog creeping under the door. Kael entered with predatory confidence, but something was different tonight. Calista saw too sharply. She smelled his rage. She sensed the evil in him like a physical odor. Her wolf snarled inside her, low, quiet, but real. Calista forced her expression neutral. Kael approached her bed slowly, eyes narrowing suspiciously. "You seem restless," he muttered. "I'm not," she lied, though her voice came out perfectly even, almost unnaturally calm. Kael studied her. She could feel his dark energy probing her aura, searching. Her wolf hissed. She pushed it down so violently her bones ached. Kael reached out, brushing his fingers down her arm. She clenched her jaw to stop a growl from rising. "Your scent is different," he murmured. Calista froze, but she kept her face blank. "I bathed in new oils," she said softly. "That is all." Kael didn't believe her, but he didn't pursue it. His lust overrode his suspicion for the moment. He stayed only briefly that night, leaving after muttering a series of territorial warnings to the guards outside her door. When the door shut, Calista collapsed onto the bed, covering her face. She couldn't keep this up much longer. Her wolf wanted out. The next morning, Calista woke early, her nerves strained, her senses overwhelming. As Kira brushed her hair, 2 handmaidens whispered in the corner. Unaware, Calista heard every word clearly. "They say the crown thief is back." Kira's hand froze in Callista's hair. Another maid shushed her. "Lower your voice. If Kael hears..." "I'm telling you," the first whispered, breathless. "A guard saw him last night, near the East Tower, the thief with the blue eyes. The one Kael swears he killed years ago." Callista's heart nearly stopped. "Damien. He was here. He was near the tower. He came back to Valkorn." Kira glanced at Calista, expecting confusion. but Callista's hands gripped the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. The maids continued, oblivious. "They say he's sneaking through the gardens. He was seen on the walls. Why would he return? Kael will have his head. Maybe he's here for something. Or someone." Calista couldn't breathe. Damien was risking everything. The palace was crawling with guards. Kael's paranoia was at its peak, and Damien, with eyes like winter storms, was still coming for her. Fear stabbed her chest. Not fear for herself, fear for him. If Kael caught him, he'd suffer a fate far worse than death. Kira leaned close, whispering sharply, "Calista, don't react, don't let them see," but Callista's pulse was racing. Her wolf prowled beneath her skin, pacing anxiously, sensing his presence. Damien wasn't just near. He was calling to her. And for the first time, Calista felt her fear hardening into determination. Sharp, fierce, burning. Kael's walls were tightening around her. Her pregnancy was a threat. Her wolf was awakening. Damien was in danger. She couldn't stay passive anymore. She couldn't wait to be saved. She had to move. She had to plan. She had to survive. Her eyes lifted to the window, toward the distant bathhouse. If she lit that torch, everything would change. The suppressed wolf within her stirred again, stronger this time, and Calista did not push it down. She let it rise, just a little, just enough, and whispered in her heart, "I'm ready." Chapter 14. The Night of Resolve. The day had been suffocating from the moment the sun rose over Valkorn's jagged towers. Calista felt it in her bones, the heaviness, the tension, the sense that fate itself was holding its breath. Tomorrow the physicians would deliver their report to Kael. Tomorrow everything would collapse. But fate did not wait until tomorrow to draw blood. It began in the courtyard, with Kira. The afternoon heat shimmered against the stone pathways as Kira hurried down the steps, carrying an empty tray she'd been asked to return to the kitchens. Her steps were quick, as they always were. Kira lived in a constant state of nervous urgency, forever aware that one slow moment could end her life. Calista watched from the upper balcony as Kira crossed the courtyard. Then Kael appeared from nowhere, a dark flash of fury, his cloak trailing like a shadow hungry for violence. "What is this?" Kael snarled, pointing to the overturned goblet on the ground, a goblet one of the guards had dropped earlier. Kira froze. "My lord, you clumsy little rodent." Callista's stomach twisted. Before Kira could defend herself, Kael seized her by her hair and yanked her forward so brutally she dropped the tray. "My king, please," she gasped. Kael's voice rose, echoing across the palace like thunder. "One more mistake, one more slip of your worthless hands, and I will sell you to the mines. Do you understand me?" Kira shook violently, tears spilling. Yes, I understand. Please." Calista could barely breathe as she watched. Her hands trembled against the balcony railing until her knuckles whitened. Kael shoved Kira to the ground. "Get out of my sight." Kira scrambled away, trembling, humiliated, her lip bleeding from where she'd hit the stone. And as Calista watched her most loyal companion suffer because of her, something inside her cracked open, cracked so sharply she felt it physically, like the splitting of bone. It wasn't just fear anymore. It wasn't even anger. It was resolve. Pure, burning, unstoppable resolve. "No more," she whispered to herself, voice cold and trembling. "No more of this because of me. No more of Kael." Her wolf stirred under her skin, pacing, sensing her decision. Tomorrow Kael would know she was pregnant. Tomorrow he would seal her from the entire world until she has given birth. But tonight she would choose her future, before he could steal it. Hours later, Calista stood in her dimly lit chamber, the moon reflecting off her trembling fingertips. Her window overlooked the silent gardens, the same place where Damien had once spoken to her of freedom, of Sintra, of a life waiting beyond Valkorn's cursed walls. She inhaled shakily. Her heart ached. Her unborn child pulsed under her palm, whether real or imagined, and then she whispered it, barely a breath, but strong enough to echo through whatever bond had begun to form. "Damien, I'm ready." The moment the words left her lips, a gust of wind slammed against the window shutters, as though the world itself had heard her. But someone else heard too. Behind her, Kira dropped the cloth she'd been folding. Her eyes widened. "My princess, is it time?" Calista turned, slowly, with a look Kira had never seen on her, a look not of fear but of certainty. "Yes," Calista whispered. "Help me." Kira didn't hesitate. Within seconds, Kira grabbed the torch they had hidden behind the bedpost for days. A torch no one was ever supposed to find. A torch meant only for one moment. This moment. Kira struck the flint, igniting the torch. The flames burst to life, bright and fierce, and Kira ran. Calista watched through her window as Kira raced across the courtyard, her small figure darting through shadows, past guard posts, past towering statues. She climbed the steps of the bathhouse tower, the very place Damien had told them to signal him. Kira reached the window, and without hesitation, she lit the torch. A bright column of flame roared upward, visible across the entire eastern grounds. For one heartbeat, the world held still. Then, chaos erupted. Horns blared, guards shouted, metal boots pounded the ground like thunder. Another thief sighting. "Seal the gates. Search the towers. Find them, now." The palace became a violent storm of motion. Servants scattered, torches were lit, weapons were drawn. From her window, Calista watched soldiers run in every direction, each searching desperately for the mysterious threat, unaware they were already too late, because Damien had seen the signal, and he was already inside. Kira returned, breathless, sweaty, trembling. "We don't have much time," she said, voice cracking. "The whole palace is in chaos. Damien will find us soon. We must go now." She darted to the wardrobe and pulled out 3 satchels, bags she had secretly packed over the week, always hoping this day would come. One for Calista, one for herself, and one stuffed with every survival item Calista could ever need. Kira smiled through her tears, a trembling, hopeful smile. "I prayed for this day. I prepared for it. I never stopped believing it would come." Calista felt her eyes burn as Kira laid out 2 hooded capes. Dark, thick, perfect for shadows. Kira helped Calista change into the outdoor clothing. Simple trousers, a tunic, boots she had never been allowed to wear. As Kira tied the cape around her shoulders, she whispered, "My princess, I am so proud of you." Calista took Kira's hands, squeezing them tightly, her voice shaking. "Thank you. For everything." A loud crash sounded in the hallway. Voices shouted. Guards stormed another corridor. Kira swung all 3 satchels over her shoulder and pulled up her hood. "Come, quickly." They slipped through Callista's chamber door, moving as quietly as ghosts. The palace was absolute madness. Guards ran past them, shouting commands. Alarm bells rang. Stone hallways echoed with chaos. But no one noticed the 2 hooded figures moving in the opposite direction, down stairways, through servants' passages, past storage rooms, past abandoned archways. The suppressed wolf inside Calista guided her, hearing footsteps before they came, sensing danger before Kira even looked up. Once, a guard turned directly toward them. Calista pushed Kira behind a pillar, pressing her back against the stone, holding her breath. The guard ran past. Her wolf thrummed in satisfaction. They continued. The tower floor grew closer. Callista's heartbeat thundered. She touched her stomach and imagined her child. When they reached the base of the tower, the air was colder, the shadows deeper. And he was there. Damien stood like a phantom carved from darkness, tall, broad-shouldered, hood thrown back just enough for Calista to see those unmistakable blue eyes. Eyes that locked onto her like she was the only light in the world. 2 others flanked him, armed, alert, and strangely gentle in their expressions, especially when they saw Kira clutching Callista's arm. But before Calista could take a single step forward, a guard rounded the corner, Hey, you! The guard lifted his blade. Thwip! An arrow flew through the air and slammed directly into his skull. The guard dropped instantly, lifeless. Kira gasped so loudly she clutched her chest, her knees nearly giving out. One of Damien's men quickly stepped forward, giving her a calm, reassuring nod. You are safe, he said softly. We harm only those who stand between us and your freedom. Kira nodded shakily, tears forming as she tried to steady herself. Then Damien stepped toward Calista. He took her hand, firmly, warmly, reverently. Calista, he whispered, breath uneven. You're safe now. Her knees nearly buckled. Take me away, she whispered back. Please. He squeezed her hand harder. With my life. They moved quickly, slipping through old servants' passages, trenches, forgotten corridors. Damien and his men led the way with the skill of wolves born to the dark. Every corner had a guard, every pathway was patrolled, every gate was watched, but they avoided them all. Damien knew these routes. He had walked them years ago. He had planned for this night. Kira clutched her satchels and ran silently behind Calista, her breath quivering each time a patrol passed. Twice they had to flatten themselves against walls as soldiers stormed past. Once they crawled under a half-collapsed archway. Once they hid behind barrels while two guards argued about the thief sightings. Calista felt Damien's hand the entire time, steady, grounding, guiding. Her wolf watched him closely, recognizing him, choosing him, and when they reached the outer wall, a crumbling section of Valkorn few ever paid attention to, Damien stopped and turned to her. This is the last gate, he whispered. Once we cross this, you are no longer his. Calista exhaled shakily. Kira squeezed her hand. I'm with you, she said softly, and together. They slipped through the dark alleyway beyond the wall, leaving Valkorn behind, leaving Kael behind, leaving death behind, moving toward freedom, and a future impossible to imagine. Chapter 15. Kael's Rage. The alarm bell had been ringing for several minutes, echoing through the marble halls of Valkorn like a warning from the heavens themselves. Guards shouted, boots slammed against stone, and flames from torches flickered violently as they ran toward the disturbance. But Kael stood frozen in the center of his war room. Something crawled beneath his skin, something wrong, something off. A deep growl tore from his throat. Why would the alarm bell sound at this hour? He muttered to himself, brows creasing. He spun around sharply, suddenly aware of a pricking sensation behind his ribs. An instinct, a whisper. His connection to Calista might not have been emotional or romantic, but his obsession ran deep enough to alert him when something shifted in the balance. His mind clicked. Calista. His heart slammed against his ribs, a wild, choking thud. Her tower, he barked. Now! Every guard in the room snapped to attention. Move! Kael charged forward with unnatural speed, his broad shoulders pushing past guards and servants who scrambled out of his path. The torches lining the stairwell trembled violently as his footsteps thundered up the tower. When he reached the landing where her handmaidens usually stood, he stopped. It was empty. Not a single girl, not a single shadow, not a single pair of trembling hands waiting to bow before him. His stomach dropped. Where are they? He hissed. The absence screamed louder than the alarm bells. He drew in a sharp breath, fear morphing into violent suspicion. With an explosive shove, he slammed his shoulder into Callista's door. It swung open easily, too easily. His breath caught. Her room was empty, but not peaceful. It was hollow, stripped of its warmth, stripped of its presence, stripped of her. Calista! He roared, tearing through the room. He ripped the silk curtains from their hooks, yanking them down with so much force the rods snapped. He flipped the vanity table with one hand, sending glass vials, perfumes, and metal trinkets scattering. He tore the mirror from the wall, smashing it against the stone floor until shards sparkled like diamonds at his feet. Calista! His voice cracked, raw and animalistic. Come out! He raged through her chambers, overturning her mattress, shredding pillows, ripping apart the carved wooden bed frame with his bare hands. A sinister tremor rippled down his spine. He was losing control. He was losing her. Just then, a guard tiptoed into the destroyed room. Your Highness. Kael whipped around like a beast cornered, eyes blazing. What? The guard swallowed, voice shaking. The physicians. They're outside waiting for you. They say it's urgent. Kael's expression twisted into something murderous. What physicians? The ones who came yesterday, sire. A deadly silence fell. Kael stepped closer, face inches from the guard's trembling lips. They were here, yesterday? The guard nodded. Kael's lips curled into a snarl. Bring them. Now. He stormed down the tower stairs, his boots echoing like thunder. When he reached the first-floor landing, the two elderly physicians stood side by side, holding scrolls and a sealed wooden case. Their faces brightened with relief when they saw him, until they noticed the murderous rage in his eyes. Your Highness, one began, bowing. We apologize for disturbing you, but... You visited her yesterday? Kael snapped. Without reporting to me? The older physician cleared his throat nervously. Yes, Your Highness, you were busy. We came to check on the princess, and we discovered something. We wanted to report to you tomorrow, but our findings were good news, so we came tonight. Kael's jaw tightened. We noticed signs of very early pregnancy, he continued. For a moment, just a moment, Kael froze. The world seemed to tilt. Pregnancy? He repeated, voice dangerously soft. Yes, the man said timidly. She showed multiple signs, so we conducted another test because her hand... He didn't finish the sentence. Kael lunged, one hand clamping around the man's throat. Kira! He thundered, shaking the physician so violently his feet left the floor. Kira lied to you! The physician clawed at Kael's wrist, face turning purple. His partner panicked. Your Highness, please, you're killing him! Kael's grip tightened. Why? He roared. Did you not inform me they came here yesterday? The younger physician fell to his knees, begging. We came as soon as we confirmed the results. It was wonderful news. We thought you'd be pleased. Kael's eyes burned with poisonous fury. Pleased? He growled. She ice gone! He finally released the man, who collapsed coughing violently, gasping for breath as his partner dragged him away. Kael's chest heaved with panting breaths. Pregnant, he whispered, the word slicing through him like a blade. His child, the heir, the only thing he had ever wanted from her. And she had fled with it. A tremor of cold, lethal hatred rippled through him. He stormed into the palace council chamber. Summon everyone, he commanded the guards. Now, moments later, the council members entered hesitantly, whispering among themselves. They had heard the alarms, sensed the unrest. But none expected what came next. Kael stood at the head of the table, shoulders squared, breathing heavy like a storm preparing to break. The princess, he said tightly, has fled the palace. Gasps erupted around the room. Kael's fist slammed onto the table, cracking the wood. And she carries my child. The room went dead silent. He swept his furious gaze across every man present. She has been taken by outsiders, he growled. By thieves, by traitors. Some councilmen exchanged uncomfortable glances. They knew how Calista had suffered. They knew what she endured. Many had pitied her quietly. Kael sensed their hesitation and exploded. You will find her, he roared. All of you! His wolf was pushing to tear out and crush them, but he held it back. No one moved, no one spoke. Fear crept into the room like a slow, spreading poison. Kael leaned forward, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. If you refuse. His eyes gleamed cold and monstrous. I will slaughter your families one by one. A collective shiver ran through the council. One by one they bowed their heads. We will support the search, the first councilman said. We will gather our forces immediately, another added. "We will find the princess," said the third, avoiding Kael's eyes. Kael straightened, breathing deeply. "Good," he said slowly, "because if the Blackthorns finds her before I do..." His smile was chilling. "They will wish they were never born." His rage swallowed the palace whole, and in the distance, far beyond the walls of Valkorn, Calista was already running toward a new life, toward freedom, toward Damien Blackthorn, toward a destiny she had never been allowed to dream of. To be continued. If you enjoyed this audiobook, subscribe to my channel for the second part of this book and also more interesting audiobooks. Join my channel by becoming a member and have early access to stories and second parts of books. Save the playlist for more upcoming audiobooks. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Check out new audiobooks in my channel. Do you think Kael will find Calista, and if he does, will she bow to him as always? Comment your answers in the comments section. Thanks for listening.